Hello, I'm Andrew Bolster, affectionately known as Bolster. Yes, it is a real surname and I didn't just make it up. And this is hopefully going to be an idiot's guide to open data science. One of the funny things about putting this talk together is that I had no idea where to put the parentheses across those sort of three words because it can be combined in a variety of different ways. Little bit of the usual boilerplate that goes at the beginning of every presentation. First off, this is a live Jupyter notebook, which means it is guaranteed to go wrong at some point. So please just indulge my patience, or I'm indulging in your patience, sorry. Websites, Bolster Online, tweets at Bolster, GitHub's at Andrew Bolster. Work at Alert Logic doing data science on the side of cybersecurity, so I get to work with people much more intelligent and evil than I am, but I just get to play with the numbers that come out of their mess. Managing about, what, 2 or 3 petabytes of traffic a day is an awful lot of fun for a data scientist to play with. I am also one of the founding directors of Farsight Labs, which is the hackerspace in Belfast, so we do loads of educational stuff, outreach, facilitation, startup, spin-up, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to be chasing down the guys from the previous talk to see if we can, you know, in our current political times, let's try and do some cross-border collaboration before we have to. This notebook is available online, so present.bolster.online. I apologize, I'm not a web developer, so it's literally just sort of a file listing, find the folder that's 2018-11 Pycon. And basically, the horrible thing about this presentation is that it has all of the data and ETL stuff in it, so it's actually quite processor heavy, so sometimes it can go horribly, horribly wrong and slow. So I saw a couple speakers going through something like this, so I just threw this together, why not? So my Pythonic journey. So I was really introduced, not really introduced, I discovered Python about 6 months before I was starting my master's year at Queen's, where I was doing sort of high performance computing, accelerated digital communication, so balancing ADSL cable frequencies and weird stuff. But I got to play with like the early versions of PyCUDA whenever you had to write your own GPU kernels before any of the nice optimizations. My proper introduction to NumPy, which has more or less been a crutch since then, and this was around about 2.4-ish in those dark, dark times. Then during my PhD, I was doing basically defense research for collaborative autonomy for autonomous underwater, or what other kind of submarines are there? Autonomous submarines. And that was 2.7 for life, and that was agent-based modeling based on SymPy, which helpfully broke and changed its dependencies 2 weeks before I was due to hand in. So that was my first introduction to pinning in requirements.txt files. So I spent some time working at a startup called Sensum doing sort of wearable biometrics, and that was really where I got heavily into proper data analysis with Pandas and doing loads of serverless AWS stuff, and finally doing the migration to Python 3. And at Alert Logic, I'm basically, if it's anything lower than 3.5, I don't want to see it. F-strings are just too damn nice. So, what is data science? This is something that you know, everyone loves to have a few definitions. Deriving actionable business and operational insights from multimodal data sources, otherwise known as turning out numbers into other numbers and occasionally making pretty graphs. And of course, there's an XKCD for everything. Data science in Northern Ireland. Everyone loves shitting on Northern Ireland, the Northern Irish especially. But whenever you actually take a look under the hood, there's actually a really vibrant corporate ecosystem. Yes, it's a combination of FDIs and local companies, but you know, there's a wide range of people working in this area, and it's actually something that we're kind of starting to specialize in. If Queens would stop talking about cybersecurity as if they invented it. Yeah, that's a joke for a couple of the Nordies in there. There's also a really solid sort of community-led open source meetup ecosystem as well. One of the interesting things, somebody asked me recently, why is there not a data science meetup in Belfast/Northern Ireland? And it's basically that data science touches on every single one of these fields. It's sort of at the side of everything, so there's not really much point for having a focused one. It's just having data science sessions in these different meetups. And for anyone who's, did I have this lined up? Yes, it does disappear down the bottom. But for anyone looking a job in the field, meetups, everyone already knows this. Going to meetups is much better than handing over your life/CV to a recruitment firm. Sorry to the sponsors. We do actually have a surprising amount of engaged sort of local government and community and voluntary sector support. So OpenDataNI, that we're going to become fairly familiar with, is sort of leading the way in trying to drag data out of government and doing something useful with it. There was a great project called Detailed Data, which really furthered the case for data journalism in Northern Ireland. I'm one of the directors of an organization called Code for Good, where basically we're looking at using data and data collection facilities to actually, do something socially good, not just, advising business or advising government, but actually like introducing kids to their environment in a meaningful way. And I also sit on the Northern Ireland Department of Finance's Open Data Advisory Board, which basically means I go in and swear at civil servants whenever they have Excel files like what we're going to see today. We've also kind of started to put ourselves on the world stage. We're hosting some reasonably big-sized conferences. We're being able to drag a couple of people across into the dark northern green bit. And yeah, that's all good. But what is open data? So I'm going to be stealing from an awful lot of people, but I asked most of them first. Open data and content can be freely used, modified, and shared by anyone for any purpose. Open data is the idea that some data should be freely available to everyone to use, republish as they wish, blah, blah, blah. But my favorite definition on this one is open data is data that's available to everyone to access, use, and share, yep, even your nan. I have stolen a lot from the Open Data Institute because they have a nice compromise between actually being right and funny, which is always a good, handy thing to have together. So key principles of open data: open, accessible, available, understandable, and traceable. This then maps, some of us, oh no, sorry, skip the slide. The following slides are stolen shamelessly, but with permission. If I could scroll down, I'm not going to risk it in this notebook, but they did respond and say, yeah, you're grand. I traded a GIF for a license. I think that's the first time I've had that happen to me. So, open data should be easy to access, especially for your nan. It needs to be shared in a standardized format that's easily traced back to where it came from. I'm going to shorten these, but basically, open data isn't the same as big data, but it'd be nice if more big data was open. So opening up big data lets people use it to spot trends, fill in gaps, and improve services. It's not the same as shared data. So this isn't something where your private data is just going to float around all over the place, and there are serious privacy concerns that have to be taken into account, and those are legitimate. Your private data should only be open if you choose to share it. I would extend this in our new GDPR landscape and say your private data should only be open if you choose to share it with particular agencies for particular purposes. Open data is good for democracy. Open data can also help governments stay on their toes, make better policies for society, the economy, and the environment. It'd be nice if we actually had like some policies in government driven by evidence instead of what the other party did last year. It's helped people in London track stolen bikes, and police in Vancouver stay one step ahead of criminals. I mean, this is all fairly standard stuff that the people in this room coming to a talk named something like this are going to be fairly aware of. A nice one actually that there's been some really interesting examples of is open data being good for your health. So whether that's the food hygiene ratings, or whether that's even just saying whether a particular restaurant is actually gluten-free or not free or anything like that, but also being able to track the, does everyone remember the Google Trends a couple of years ago, whenever they started monitoring for whenever searches for flu medicine came in, or whenever the searches for coughs, so they could actually identify when and how big that season's flu spike was going to be just by extrapolating ahead. There's been similar programs that are using that on top of open data. There you go. Open data can save lives. One of the interesting projects is, so there's loads of big multinational charity organizations and foundations that all want to save the world all at once. So let's all have all of these agencies sending water to Africa. Right, okay, that's going to be great, but what about for whenever people are actually looking for mosquito nets? So there's been some programs of using open data and open result sharing between these organizations to try and deconflict and make their operations complementary rather than contradictory. Helps you get around the city. We've seen most of this stuff. Entertainingly enough, in an awful lot of these examples, Northern Ireland is exempt because we just don't give enough open data out yet. But yeah, such is life. But we do at least have OpenStreetMap coverage, which is always good. We're near the, can be really pretty, but not whenever I have a broken GIF. Never mind. So going back on to stuff that we might be a little bit familiar. Who's familiar with the 5-star system? Oh, right, okay. So the god of the internet, Al Gore, no, sorry, Tim Berners-Lee, came up with this system for the 5-star, where it's basically with these little letters. It's 1 star is congratulations, you've put a PDF online. Well done. 2 stars is, oh, Excel. That's nice. CSV is right, okay, congratulations, thank you very much, we've got that far. Then we go on to the one that's a little bit weird for people to understand, this idea of this URI, the Universal Resource Indicator? Yeah, I can always get mixed up. But it's basically a way of saying that this data lives in this place, and lives in this place forever. That means that you're able to effectively have traceability in your data. You say, I based my stuff off this link, then that link could be linking to something else. And then we go into the really weird one that's very, very optimistic, which is the 5-star properly, fully linked data, including contextual metadata, being able to link to definitions of terms, and we're almost think about it like semantic data. 5-star is the dream. I think an awful lot of the time it's going to be very, very difficult to get, especially governments, up to that level. I'm basically targeting 3/4. If we can get 3/4, I'd be fairly happy. Oh, we'll see. Yeah. Now, Northern Ireland shit at everything, right? We know that anyway. So that's just a given, right? So Northern Ireland election results. I'm always entertained that that's third from the bottom is just one of the worst. We just don't give anything out. We don't even record it internally. It's insane. It's fine. And government spending, just fire up another fucking boiler. But funnily enough. Whenever we look at the Open Data Index from OKFN, if I don't want my pointer, so this basically ranks countries across the world, and funnily enough, we're number 10 in the world. That's not bad. Now, unfortunately, I did just check this, and the Republic isn't on this list, but what I found was quite entertaining was, did something happen and... I mean, for the record, I still have my get out of Brexit jail free card. So yeah, that's fine. Fine, whatever. It just means that we're not having to get stuck with the other bastards. Sorry. So, moving on to actually using this data. What is data-driven journalism? This is a long quote that basically says, swap the camera for the laptop. And I've cut off my own quote, brilliant. Providing information and analysis to help inform us all about important issues of the day. And yeah, fantastic. I'm going to drop into this just a second. There we go. Just proof that it is actually a live notebook. So using open data and data science principles to ask, analyze, and answer complex or contentious questions or areas of inquiry using available evidence. And yeah, it's always good to cite yourself on presentation, because then you're always got your citations at least up to date. So in any sort of area of journalism or inquiry, you start off with this idea of what do you want to know? You have a particular question that you're trying to find an answer for. In my experience, that's usually the wrong approach, because especially whenever you're dealing with sometimes quite fuzzy data sources, you may not necessarily get exactly the right answer to the exact question that you start off with. So I generally go, what do you want to know more about? So whenever I was starting to put this together, there was the places scandal in Northern Ireland. It was more or less saying, there weren't enough school places for secondary school children. But I literally just put into Google, Northern Ireland, education, two things that I vaguely care about. Then headed over to our old friend OpenDataNI. So this is again government-run site that's trying to pull together data from across all of those areas, and literally just put places into the search bar and went, okay, no, that looks kind of legitimate, right? School census, post-primary, that might have reasonable data sources. Yeah, okay, so we've got reference data, whatever that is. We've got enrollments, which sounds useful. Free school ... which ends up being free school meals, which is a reasonably good passive metric for deprivation in particular areas. SEN is special educational needs. We'll come back to that one later. Religion, we will not come back to that later. And newcomers, which was a weird rolling sort of almost churn rate, and it's very badly defined, so we don't actually touch that one again. But what do we think we have? List of schools at a council or constituency level and postcodes, enrolments for 16-17, demographic comparisons, and a churn rate, but it's so vaguely defined that we don't actually know what we can do with it. What would we like to have? We'd like to have more years with the same format. Sorry, I've got PTSD from dealing with this data set. Correlations to deprivation would be nice. Somebody else can ask the question of if there's any correlation to political alignment. We do a little bit about population change. I would love to do more about achievement and mobility. We'll build up to that one, but we don't have enough data to make any reasonable answers yet. And other measures that we can tie things to. But first things first, it's often quite daunting to try and tackle something with loads of bits, so I often try and drill down into one data set so that I understand it and then basically add things along as I get them out. And part of that process is, hands up, who knows what an ETL is? Yeah, that's more like it. So, extraction, transformation, loading, otherwise get, clean, and store. Open government or government open data is notoriously difficult to wander around, and the next 10-ish minutes is going to be me ranting about how terrible it is, so I apologize in advance. But when in doubt, bring in pandas. Pandas just answers everything most of the time if you can give it the right incantations. So you can go to the particular data set that we were looking at earlier, grab the link for the CSV, hand it to pandas, and it'll just read it. And you get loads of this vaguely interesting looking information, and if I try not to actually do any of the weird slidey stuff. But we've got loads of information in there, but that's not exactly a really sustainable way of reliably getting the data. The other option is OpenDataNI being built on top of the CCAN platform means that it's got an API. I try and be friendly and at least tell them that it's me with whatever the current version number of me is, which I think is about 30.3. Something like that. So just be kind to your data providers. Just a little bit of traceability. I did actually ask them if I could get the user agent data from the website to actually plot what I was doing versus the regular traffic, but they haven't got that back to me yet. But using this API, you can list what are called packages. So these are these bundles of data sets. Except, as we are going to see, government is absolutely shit at naming conventions, just all over the show. There's no schema, there's no nothing, it's just, anyway. But we do eventually find what the right one is, so it's school, census, post-primary, which sounds kind of fine. Unfortunately, it's only for 1 year, so that means that package is kind of stuffed forever. And we can use the API to directly grab the CSVs, more or less doing the same thing that we did before, and now we at least have a list of what we think we might have. Fine, okay, fine, whatever. But as I said, that's only available for 1 year. You can't derive any actual insights on change or relationships based on 1 year of data. Helpfully, the Department of Education does have this information going back to 2009. So we spin up, we must deal with it. So we spin up, we just manually check through the website, can pandas read the Excel file, and it turns out this bollocks. So, these are not numbers. That's what this looks like. This is the first sheet of the open data, which is really helpful. Now, one key thing that it took me a while to work out is, on the first page, completely unconnected with any data, I would normally just throw this away, but down here, we have this really interesting key, right? So bear that in mind for the next couple of slides. So, common data extraction hellscapes, inconsistent naming conventions, format conventions, schema conventions, lexical conventions, policy changes, shifting definitions and classifications, and lack of meta-linking during all of the above changes. Government policy changes on a dime, and it very rarely gives you a diff. So, yeah, let's see what this actually looks like. Spot the difference. This is formatted terribly, but this is the same data for 2 different years. So the order of the fields is completely changed, even if you get rid of the URL dumping. There's this random extra junk that's been thrown in of this sup_0, and for some godforsaken reason, they decided to change the case on the extension. Right. Web crawling to the rescue, beautiful SIP, yay! Now, there is another notebook in that repository that has the full versions of this, but needless to say, it was painful. But what you end up with is, oh, and it's hidden my GIF. There was a Love Island GIF down at the bottom of that, but I don't think we really need it. Yeah, fine. Oh, no, there it is. Yeah, you don't often get a Love Island GIF at a technical conference, but yes, that big function worked, and we have something that looks vaguely useful, hopefully. So we've technically got the data. We have acquired the data, right? Now the hard bit. This is the most frustrating part of being a data scientist engineer. and I am going to show you why. Naming conventions. Right. So, right, okay, let's not try and deal with everything at once. Let's just look at post-primary data. No, right, okay, no, still fucked. No, my favorite one in this one is, I'm not going to go too far away from the microphone, but double digit, 4-digit, double digit, dash, sometimes. It's just, right. So, don't try and tackle it all at once. Can we at least nail down to getting the available places data? 2017, yes, we've got a list. 2016, yes, we've got all of this. And bugger all else for any of the other years. Because, if this is the right slide, in 2016, 2017, there was a separate file for these. This was separate extension. Now, pay attention. Approved enrollments, actual enrollments, supernumerary pupils, and available places. Year before, this was now in another sheet within a larger Excel sheet with a completely different name as the sheet name. And it was approved admissions, approved enrollments, and unfilled places. Yeah, right, yeah, fine. Okay, right, never mind, right, can we introspect the Excel files to work out what data might be available in the sheets, and then can we factor this down into something that, you could at least look at and compare, and then actually, we're data scientists, so we visualize everything, so may as well visualize our assumptions. For the love of God. So basically every year there's some kind of breaking change on what data is available between different schemas, if you could call them that. So yeah, this was me. There was another version of this, which was the from Wolf of Wall Street, Leo doing the fingers straight down the camera, but I thought that might not be as appropriate. So yeah, I basically spent 2.5 days refactoring this data to turn into a, I think it's about 400 lines long scripts to try and just refactor things. So over the course of the years, this is some of the available that just in one data set. This is the reference data set, right? The one that's supposed to be your ground truth for working out what schools there are, where they are, and what could, it's simple things like the name. That would be nice. I think name was one of the only ones that stayed. But yeah, constituency helpfully stayed completely, but yeah, fine. Although somehow in between we actually changed the number of departments. I don't know. Yeah. So sometimes understanding the data is more painful and ugly than expected. This was the only document that I could find that was about 80 pages long that would actually explain what supernumerary means in the Northern Ireland educational context. It should have just gone with my gut. It means extra. But as a side note, if any of you are preparing policy documentation for any situation whatsoever, do not, under any circumstances, use Comic Sans. This was a fun one that I was discussing, that sometimes using multiple tools simultaneously. So you're looking at Excel and going, right, okay, I understand what that column is, so then I can map this and use it as a rename function. Oh, whenever I run it again, Pandas craps itself because Excel puts this weird header thing in the file whenever it's opened that means that it can't be opened by any. And on a slightly more serious note, sometimes you have to give up on stuff because you don't know enough about it. Special educational needs classification policy is over 100 pages long and changes. Oh, I'm getting nowhere near where I wanted on this one. Appears to change every year. I'm not an expert on education policy, so I'm not going to comment on it. I'm also not an expert on religion, so I'm not touching religion in Northern Ireland with a 30-foot flagpole. But I'm now going to have to properly accelerate. I was planning on this being on time. Yeah, machine readable. Going back to that key before, what number is an asterisk? What number is a hash? This was a helpful one where basically it was 3 cells. So even on OpenDataNI, it only actually showed the header as being the bottom cell because people apparently don't know how to merge cells. Fine. Tables at the bottom can just go to hell. Yeah, this was not fun, but we got it, and I'm now going to blitz through this. I might go slightly over, I'm sorry, but yeah, bring it all together. So, actually going to data, yay! Panels are actually deprecated. I'm going to skip a couple of things through this because these are all boring. Stacked bar graphs can go to hell. Yeah, skip. Skip, skip, skip. Now, there's a fun side on this. Ask me about it later, but when is 0 not nothing? I'm going to skip straight through that, see if that works. No, come on. Right, we'll do this quickly. This is the average cohort size, so year group in a school, and basically something happened in 2015. We can go into some really ugly visualizations. That tells you absolutely nothing, but if you turn it into the number of students in each school, you see that there are these clusters of dive-bombing schools that just disappear. So basically, no shocker to anyone, that means that the school was closed. And if, oh, no, I actually wanted that one. So basically, since 2009, that's 33 schools have been closed in Northern Ireland, and 11 of them were closed in 2014, which then explains that cohort bump. So yeah, we actually got one reasonable outcome from this talk. But what does it all mean? None of this makes any sense until you actually throw it in with some contextual data. So I grabbed the census information, which we have, and a quick one. Can anyone tell me at least one interesting thing about this graph and why it's weird? What the hell happened here? It's basically that they go 30 or 85 and above all counts into one bubble. I will be very, very quick. Stack bar charts can go to hell. I like these rainbows, but I don't like the color scheme, so we'll wrap it in a nice handler with a better color scheme, and yeah, we get these lovelies. So let's step through some entertaining bits, hopefully. So South Belfast, I've called the kinky constituency. That's basically because at 18, all of the students go there. I'm going to skip through an awful lot of these, and yeah, Foyle basically is the only constituency that actually has a proper brain drain for the under 50s. Basically, the younger population is getting less. It's insane. I had loads of smart-ass comments for these, but yeah, fine. That's the scale of what happens to South Belfast whenever people come to university. And then we do standard normalization. I'm skipping through these because we do have animated GIFs, and everyone loves an animated GIF, but we will come back to these. Sorry. That is also boring. And this was a fun one, right? What age group rules the roost? But we're going to move on. Let's do some mapping. So we pull in a map. How clever. We work out some nice ways to annotate it. And just because I'm sure your geography in Northern Ireland is slightly worse than mine, so put some names on it. And if this works, colors! So this is just the area. Congratulations, big things are big. Horribly encoded statistics. I apologize for this, but basically my naming convention was absolutely terrible because at this point I was sick to death of this data set. So let's run through all of the hell of this. Please have fun with this notebook, but this was the average age. So you can basically see that everything down the east is old people. Who rules the roost? So yeah, everything east is run by old people. This is a fun one. There are 10% more women than men in West Belfast. So yeah, if you're in the dating pool, go for it. Yeah, that was not useful. Come on, right, I'm going to skip through an awful lot of these so that we can get to the animated GIFs, which is what everyone actually really cares about. Yeah, come on. Free school meals, no surprise, centred on urban areas, so that's basically Foyle and specifically West Belfast. South Belfast seems to avoid that one, I wonder why. That's the proportion of enrolled. Yes, we are in GIF land. And this is all very fancy ways of doing it, but fine. And turn all of the individual frames into a GIF. We're getting older, and we're surviving longer, which is good, but mostly in the East. Younger people are taking over, and they're coming in from the West. Read into that what you will. Yep, this has been more or less constant. So yeah, West Belfast, if you're looking to pick up a female partner, yeah, go for it. Free school meals are unfortunately rising with the population, and it gets worse. The divide between where free school meals are distributed across the rest of the province is being flattened, so it's basically just Belfast and Derry. There aren't necessarily fewer available school places. It's all more or less within an order of magnitude and within the statistical bounds. But there's one little odd bit of this, which I'll come back to in a bit. Population density isn't changing at all, correct for your baselines. Yeah, there are very few students in this South Antrim Lagan Valley area. My theory is that that's because they're sending them into the big town. Population distribution shift. These are my two favourite graphs of the whole thing. That's why I was rushing through, and I'm going to skip through this one because this is the absolute one, but what we actually want is to be normalised within the constituency. So what we can see here quickly, if I have this, Belfast South just steals everybody's children, holds onto them for about 10 years, and then they bugger off back home. You can see this divot, this absolute chunk being dragged out of every single other constituency except for, I think, Foyle and East Londonderry, and they basically all go to Belfast. Other interesting factors, this East Antrim one, have a look at this line whenever it shifts back. Basically, it'll start off there, once it loops-ish, and basically nobody's coming in to fill that spot, and it's basically the population isn't changing, people are just getting older and there's nobody new coming in. But as you can sort of see on the right hand side, in general, yep, we're living longer and we're getting better, well, surviving, congratulations us. I'm not going to go into the grammar school one because it actually had, I thought there would be a good result coming out of this, but it's no shocker, South Belfast has grammar schools, who'd have thought? This is a horrible graph trying to demonstrate how pivot tables are horrible graphs. And finally, right, conclusions, hypotheses, and conjectures. If you actually look back at the maps, and I won't for purposes of time, East Antrim actually looks like a little Britain. Physically looks like the island of Great Britain, but fair enough. No one wants to go to school in West Belfast for some reason. Everyone wants to go to school in North Down for some reason. The place of scandal, going back to what we were actually starting with, is either overblown or related to preference, where parents are just saying, oh no, I'm not going to go to that school, I want to go to that school. There's a demographic wave of under 11s which is about to hit the education system in the next year and a half. It's about a 20% bump, and it's weird. So yeah, good luck to all of the secondary school teachers. South Belfast steals all the 18-year-olds, keeps them a decade. Foyle's been experiencing a sustained brain drain of under 35s that's now impacting services. And yeah, grammar schools doesn't really do anything interesting. Summary on the whole open data science thing. Data is hard. Open data without a budget or angry pedantic customers is hard, and that generally with data normally there's the 80-20 rule where 20% of your effort will get you 80% of your answers. With open data it's completely the other way around. You have to put in 90% of the work to get 10% of the results because it's all ahead of time. I was hoping whenever I was putting this together to get into lovely grand discussions about achievement and everything like that. Didn't get anywhere fucking near it, but thank you very much for your time and patience, and I am more than happy to take GitHub issues and pull requests. So yeah, if you correct anything, cheers.